Hi guys, क्या हाल चाल है भाई? How are you guys doing? Hello everybody. Uh, uh, how are you guys doing? And I hope you had a lovely Diwali. खूब सारा enjoy किया होगा आपने and must have had all good food. Diwali is all about like having good food, I would say. Like um, for when we were kids, Diwali used to be like a 10-day affair kind of a thing. Like all the preparation leading up to it had the complete excitement was there. Okay, so uh, sorry, as usual, my allergies are back, and so there are few minor hiccups. Anyways, so what we are doing right now is qualitative analysis of cations, and we until now have done the dry tests. Okay, this chapter being very important, we are doing it very systematically, and this is also known as a systematic analysis. Okay, इसको हम systematic analysis इसलिए बोलते हैं क्योंकि everything is to be done very systematically. You cannot just jump the ship from one point to another point. ऐसा आप नहीं कर सकते हो कि आपने आज कुछ पढ़ा कल कुछ और कर ले रहे हो. There is no connectivity between them. No. So we started with identification of acid radicals. Then we discuss what are the tests for acid radicals, the dry tests for acid radicals, the wet tests for acid radicals. We did that, and then right now, until now, what we have done is the dry test for cations. So today we would discuss the wet test for cations. Okay. Today we would be discussing the wet test for cations. Okay, so keep a pen and a paper ready because everything that we would be discussing falls in a very systematic manner, and we will have to like you will have to like remember a lot of information. So if you have to remember a lot of information, the best way to do that is like listening to whatever I'm telling and then making a bit a short note of it, and then making a you can make a descriptive note of it, and finally solving questions. Okay, without solving questions you can't do really good in this chapter. If you want to do good in this chapter, you have to solve questions. Okay, so chaliye, let's start today's session. So today's session we will be discussing the detection of cations, and we would be discussing the wet test for basic radicals. As you all know, in the last class we had discussed that all these radicals are divided into certain number of groups, and these groups are based on something known as the solubility product. For every group there is a specific group reagent, and that group reagent is like this, whatever it is written over here. So you can see that dilute HCl is the group reagent for group 1, dilute H2 dilute HCl and H2S is group reagent for group 2A and 2B. NH4OH and NH4Cl is group reagent for group 3A. And I had told you that group 3A can also be known as group 3, group 3B can also be known as group 4, and this is for group 5 or group 4. So if this becomes group 4, this becomes group 5, and this becomes group 6. Remember that group 6 includes those cations for which we do not have any specific reagent. Now it is important to know that every group, every test, whatever we are doing, is done in a very systematic manner. And why it is known as systematic? Because you can see that H2S and dilute HCl हम यहाँ पे use करें second group के लिए, and we are using H2S and NH4OH and H4Cl in group 3B, or you can call it group 4. Then why shouldn't we use NH4OH in for group 2A, or why can't we use HCl for group 4? What is the reason for that? The things are very simple out here. So the first thing is like the first group, or I would say group 1. group 1, the group reagent is dilute HCl. That means all the cations which are present over here will be precipitated as their chlorides. आप ये देख सकते हो that PbCl2, HgCl2 लिखा गया and HeCl. So dilute HCl, that means all these cations are precipitated as chlorides. If you take group 2, then you are utilizing H2S in dilute HCl. Now when you are using H2S in dilute HCl, what happens is H2S, being a weak electrolyte, is present in this equilibrium, H plus S2 minus, and HCl is a strong electrolyte. Now what happens is the H plus ion supplies H plus to this equilibrium, which suppresses the dissociation of H2S. Since it suppresses the dissociation of H2S, the sulfide ion concentration is less over here. It is less over here. Okay? Okay? Please do remember that for group 2, the sulfide ion concentration required is less, while for group 4, or you can say group 3b, we have taken H2S in presence of NH4OH and NH4Cl. NH4OH and NH4Cl give rise to a basic medium, and in a basic medium the H plus from this equilibrium will be removed because it will react with the base to form H2O, and the reaction will move in the forward direction giving rise to a higher sulfide concentration. So the sulfide ion concentration is higher over here. So group 2 cations are being precipitated as sulfides and they require higher concentration of sulfides, and group 4 cations require higher concentration of sulfides, and group 2 cations require lower concentration of sulfides. Okay, they require higher concentration of sulfides for precipitation, and these requires lower concentration of sulfides for precipitation. Okay, so please do remember that though H2S is being used in 2 different places, it is vital that the sulfide ion concentration is properly adjusted so that precipitation of group 2 takes place rather than precipitation of group 4. So imagine there is a solution which contains group 2 cations and group 4 cations, and rather than using H2S and HCl, you straight away use H2S in presence of NH4OH and NH4Cl. Then group 2 cations as well as group 4 cations both will get precipitated because the sulfide ion concentration will immediately increase. Okay, what you need, आपको क्या चाहिए, कम सल्फाइड आयन कंसंट्रेशन चाहिए ग्रुप 2 के कैटायंस को प्रेसिपिटेट करने के लिए. तो आप क्या करोगे कि सबसे पहले यू विल यूटिलाइज HCl and H2S. You precipitate group 2, whatever is left out, whatever filtrate is left out, आप उसको then you pass H2S in presence of NH4OH, NH4Cl. Clear? So everything is being done in a proper manner. That is the reason it is known as systematic analysis. So what does this systematic analysis tells us? Suppose you are given a salt and that salt contains certain number of cations. Okay. So salt contains certain number of cations. So if the salt contains certain number of cations, what should you be doing? First you dissolve the salt in water. Okay? Man, I can read your chat. The thing is, मैं अगर आपके चैट पढ़ने में ही समय स्पेंड कर दूंगा तो मैं पढ़ाऊंगा कब, बताओ. And it is vital to know that things which we have discussed already, if you keep asking them, then I cannot spend time on that, na man. अब पुराने वीडियोस देख लीजिए, ठीक है. So why it is called wet test? Because we have already discussed this fact that wet tests are those tests which are done in water. So what is the method? The method is you take salt in water, you make a solution. Okay? So once you make a solution, तो solution में सबसे पहले आप क्या करते हो कि you add dilute HCl. Okay? If you observe some precipitate, you separate that precipitate. आप separate कैसे करोगे? Filtration करके. You separate that precipitate, and so precipitate will be separated, and what you will get is a decantate बोलते हैं, filtrate आप बोल लो. Okay, you can, so whatever is the precipitate, you separate the precipitate. And why are we separating the precipitate? Because the precipitate contains the cations of group 1, because dilute HCl will give a precipitate only for cations of group 1. It will not give precipitate for cations of any other group. Okay, if you ask me that why, then because the solubility product of group 1 cation group 1 cation chlorides is least. सबसे कम जिन cations का solubility product रहेगा, that will get precipitated. Okay, so if I am taking group 1 cations, if there are any group 1 cations, they will get precipitated, the others will be left behind in the solution. तो filtrate जो आपको मिल गया. अब आप filtrate में क्या करोगे कि you pass H2S, because the medium is already acidic, you pass H2S. Again, if you get precipitate, separate the precipitate and take the filtrate. So separate the precipitate and take the filtrate. So this is the filtrate. Then pass H2S, separate the precipitate and then take the filtrate. Now what you have to do is you make the medium sufficiently basic. Before doing that, you add HNO3 to convert any ferrous ion which is present to ferric ion, and then add NH4OH and NH4Cl. You will get hydroxides, and then connect the filtrate. And once you have done this, then add ammonium carbonate, ammonium chloride. So ammonium chloride, ammonium hydroxide is already present. Now add ammonium carbonate, you get the precipitate of group 5. And so what you have is every group which has been separated, and finally something is being left behind in the filtrate, which could only be the cations for group 6, जिनके लिए कोई specific group reagent नहीं है. Okay, for that you have to do individual tests for detecting each and every cation. Now please do remember that as per NCERT, these are the cations that you have to study. These are the cations that you have to study. These are the cations that will come in your examination as well. From group 1, lead will come in the examination. From group 2, lead, copper and arsenic will come in the examination. From group 3, aluminium and iron will come. 4, cobalt, nickel, manganese and zinc, all of them will come. And group 5, barium, strontium, calcium will come. So please do remember that there might be so many different cations, but as for doing good in your 12th board examinations, and for doing good at mains and for doing good at NEET, you at least need to know this. इतना तो minimum आपको चाहिए, इतना minimum you need to know. Okay, group 6 and group 0, they will have no specific reagent, and so you have to detect them separately. ओके, इंडिविजुअली आप इनका डिटेक्शन करते हो. So let's start with group 1. Okay, let's start with group 1. Now group 1 का detection आप कैसे करोगे? Group 1 detection is done by adding dilute HCl. Okay, if you are getting a precipitate, it means, so take a small amount of original solution. So take a small amount of original solution and add cold water to it. Along with while adding HCl, if a white precipitate appears, this indicates the presence of lead from group 1. Remember, from group 1 we only need to confirm the presence of lead, and lead chloride का color क्या होता है? White. Okay, lead chloride is white in color. ठीक है, so आपको जो अगर precipitate मिल गया, that suggests that group 1 is present. Now what you have to do is you have to confirm the presence of lead by doing certain tests. अब क्या क्या टेस्ट करोगे? So you will add potassium iodide. Okay, so the precipitate whatever is obtained, याद रखो lead chloride is insoluble in cold water. PbCl2, it is insoluble in cold water. It is soluble in hot water. Okay, it is soluble in hot water. Now if the precipitate is obtained, you separate the precipitate because precipitate contains Pb2 plus ion. So you separate the precipitate and you add hot water to it so that the precipitate dissolves. Once the precipitate dissolves, what you have to do is you have to separate the solution which you have obtained in 3 parts. Okay, so let me just show this to you over here, that how this is to be done. So you take the original solution, OG solution, and you add dilute HCl. Once you obtain add dilute HCl, you will obtain a precipitate and you will obtain a filtrate. The precipitate is of group 1. And once you obtain the precipitate for group 1, you dissolve this precipitate in hot water. Once you dissolve it in hot water, you separate the solution into 3 parts. एक solution में आप add कीजिए Ki, दूसरे solution में add कीजिए potassium chromate, and तीसरे solution में add कीजिए H2SO4. Understood? Here, how can I tell you when would JEE means be conducted? Like if the NTA notification is not out, how can any teacher tell you? NTA is the organizing organization. ना? वो लोग organize करते हैं JEE means. They haven't given me any information. There's no information out. Okay, so if there is no information outside, we just have to wait. So what will happen? If you add potassium iodide, you'll get a yellow precipitate. Okay? When you add potassium iodide, you will get a yellow precipitate. The yellow precipitate is of PbI2. Then you add potassium chromate. You will again get a yellow precipitate, but this yellow precipitate is soluble in NaOH. Okay? So you will get yellow precipitate with potassium iodide, you will get yellow precipitate with K2CrO4, but yellow precipitate that is obtained from K2CrO4, that is PbCrO4. Yellow precipitate which is obtained is PbCrO4. This PbCrO4 is soluble in NaOH. Now you add H2SO4, you will get a white precipitate of lead sulfate, and which is soluble in ammonium acetate solution. Understood? Is that understood? So there are three tests. If I have to write, then I'll write it like this. So first, Pb2 plus reacts with Ki, gives Pbi2. Second, Pb2 plus reacts with K2CrO4, it will give PbCrO4. And third, Pb2 plus will react with H2SO4, it will give a precipitate of PbSO4. आपको तीन तरह के precipitate आपको मिल जाएंगे. पहले दो precipitates जो है they are yellow in color. Okay. Pbi2 is yellow, PbCrO4 is yellow. PbCrO4 is soluble in NaOH. Okay, PbCrO4 is soluble in NaOH. Okay. If you are being asked that Pbi2 is soluble in what? Pbi2 is soluble in hot water, just like PbCl2. Pbi2 is soluble in hot water. PbSO4 is white in color and it is soluble in ammonium acetate. Okay, chalo. Let's move on to the next part. That is a test for group 2. Now test for group 2 आप कैसे करोगे? जो filtrate आपको group 1 से मिला है, whatever filtrate that you have obtained in group 1, you will pass H2S gas through it. Now H2S gas in the laboratory is obtained from an apparatus which is known as Kipps apparatus. So this is the Kipps apparatus from where H2S gas is obtained. How do we obtain H2S gas? So what we do is we add in this Kipps apparatus there is iron sulfide which is present. Iron sulfide reacts and we add H2SO4 to it. So in this arrangement, in this apparatus, there is H2SO4 and iron sulfide. Iron sulfide reacts with H2SO4 to generate H2S gas, and that H2S gas is collected in this chamber. Sorry. The H2S gas is collected in this chamber, and this H2S gas is being passed through the, or it is being bubbled through the solution or the filtrate that you obtain. Okay. So pass H2S gas through the solution to ensure complete precipitation. Clear? So there are three types of colors that you have to keep in mind. If you are getting Cu2 plus Pb2 plus, if there is Cu2 plus and Pb2 plus in the solution, then the precipitate that you would obtain will be black. But if there is arsenic plus 3, As3 plus, then the precipitate that you would get is yellow. Okay. Understood? So the precipitate color will tell you that which cation is present. In fact, most of the questions in JEE mains or NEET will just require you to remember the color of these precipitates. If you remember the color of these precipitates, you will be able to answer most of the questions because you are not being asked reactions. Okay? वो अपने करना क्या है? You have to confirm that these cations are present. So for confirmation, you will take the precipitate and dissolve it in yellow ammonium sulfide. NH4 whole twice S, इसको बोलते हैं YAS, that is yellow ammonium sulfide. So take the precipitate if is obtained, take the precipitate of group 2 and add ammonium sulfide to it. Okay, you add ammonium sulfide solution to it. Now when you add ammonium sulfide solution, if you obtain a precipitate, remember, if you obtain the precipitate, like if whatever precipitate was there, if it doesn't dissolve, इसका मतलब ये हो रहा है कि if the precipitate which is being obtained doesn't dissolve, then it is the copper group. The copper group includes copper and lead. If it dissolves, it automatically means arsenic is present. So if the this precipitate of arsenic is soluble, this is soluble in yellow ammonium sulfide, and this is insoluble in YAS. Okay, is that clear? So if the yellow precipitate is soluble, if the yellow precipitate is soluble, then arsenic is confirmed. But arsenic के लिए अलग से आपको टेस्ट करना है, तो what you have to do is you add concentrated nitric acid and ammonium molybdate. Okay, heat the press. So you add concentrated nitric acid and ammonium molybdate. What you would obtain is a canary yellow precipitate. Clear? So let me just describe this thing over here, that how are we doing this. So what, ठीक से समझ लीजिए, you have taken the filtrate that you have obtained from group 1, and to that filtrate you have added or you have passed H2S gas. If you obtain a precipitate, be it any color, it means there is group 2 which is present. अब आप क्या करोगे? If group 2 is present, then you will separate that precipitate. Then the precipitate color tells you a lot, gives you a lot of information. ये precipitate आपका black भी हो सकता है, and this precipitate could be yellow. If the precipitate is yellow, that means it is arsenic. If the precipitate is black, it means it could be copper or lead. So what you do is you take this precipitate and dissolve, and you attempt to dissolve it in ammonium sulfide. Now this ammonium sulfide will dissolve the yellow precipitate but will leave the black colored precipitates undissolved. ठीक है, ये आपने सेकेंडली मतलब सेकेंड टेस्ट भी आपने कंफर्म कर लिया कि आर्सेनिक प्रेजेंट है. नाउ व्हाट यू डू इज, अगर वो डिसॉल्व कर जाता है, देन ऐड नाइट्रिक एसिड टू इट, फिर से एक प्रेसिपिटेट आ जाएगा. ओके, एंड व्हाट यू डू फर्दर इज okay, so sorry, you add HCl, you will get a precipitate, and then you add nitric acid and ammonium molybdate, that will give a canary yellow precipitate which will confirm the presence of arsenic. Okay, now if there is if the black precipitate is insoluble in ammonium sulfide, what you do is you boil the precipitate with dilute nitric acid and few drops of alcohol and dilute H2SO4. And if you get a white precipitate, it is lead. If there is no precipitate, that means there is copper. Okay, if there is no precipitate, then there is copper. Clear? Now copper को further हम डिटेक्ट कैसे करते हैं? अगर precipitate नहीं बन रहा है, then add ammonium hydroxide and then add acetic acid and potassium ferrocyanide. You will get a chocolate brown precipitate. That chocolate brown precipitate confirms the presence of copper. Once lead is obtained, lead को टेस्ट करने के पहले भी आपने टेस्ट देख चुके हो पोटेशियम आयोडाइड के साथ, and you have already seen how to confirm the presence of lead. ठीक है? Clear? So this is how things are to be done. Now what you have to do is you have to take the NCERT lab manual, you have to read this part, make notes of the same information, and finally solve questions. Clear? Man, this is live, but आप expect करोगे कि मैं chat पे जवाब दे भी पाऊंगा और I will be able to teach. That is not possible. Okay, so let's look at test for group 3. So what you do is, the filtrate that you obtain from group 2, you add some few drops of concentrated nitric acid. सबसे पहला काम आपको करना क्या है? You add nitric acid, few drops of nitric acid. Now why nitric acid is being added? Nitric acid is being added so as to oxidize any Fe2 plus which is present in the solution into Fe3 plus. Okay? Now you cool and then you boil the solution. Why do you boil the solution? So that if hydrogen sulfide which is present in the solution goes away. क्योंकि आपको सल्फाइड इसके आगे जरूरत नहीं है ग्रुप 3 में. So you boil the solution and you add dilute HNO3. So मैं लिख देता हूं यहाँ पे क्या करना है आपको. So you take the filtrate. And you boil it. It removes H2S, and to this filtrate which you have boiled, you add HNO3. It converts Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus. Okay. Now what you have to do is, solution is still acidic. आपको group 3 का जो टेस्ट करना होता है वो basic medium में करना होता है. So you take this solution and add NH4Cl plus NH4OH until there is a smell of ammonia. Until there is a smell of ammonia. Okay? Till the solution smells of ammonia. Now at this juncture, if you get a brown precipitate, that means there is iron. If you get a gelatinous white precipitate, gelatinous मतलब gel के जैसा दिखेगा, gelatinous white precipitate, that means there is aluminium. So this white precipitate is gelatinous. Okay, gelatinous white precipitate, if it is obtained, that means there is aluminium. Okay, and if the precipitate is brown in color, that means there is iron. In NCERT and in CBSE and in your 12th standard examination, board examination, it is expected that you know that what are the color of these precipitates. So remember what is the nature of this precipitate? We are obtaining the precipitate of a hydroxide, because what we have added is ammonium chloride and NH4OH. We have created a buffer solution of NH4OH and NH4Cl. OH minus ions come from this buffer solution and they combine with these cations to form the hydroxide. So this brown precipitate is of FeOH whole thrice, and this white precipitate is of AlOH whole thrice. Why can't it be tested? Brazen Waffle is asking that why can't it be tested in an acidic medium? Is it that we don't have anything to test or something? See, every cation would not give a precipitate. See, objective is to confirm their presence. How would you confirm their presence? To confirm the presence, you need a specific reagent. Certain reagents would give soluble salts, but certain reagents would not give soluble products. So we need to identify those commonly available reagents which do not give soluble products. If we do not get soluble products, that will be an indication that these cations are present. For group 3, the hydroxides are insoluble. Like for Fe, FeOH3 is insoluble. However, FeCl3 is soluble. Okay, FeCl3 पानी में dissolve कर जाता है. Okay, AlOH whole thrice is insoluble. It is obtained as a gelatinous white precipitate. So we need to identify whether these ions are present by the observation that whether these precipitates are formed or not. And to form these precipitates, we have to make a very excellent choice of reagent. These choices are based on the solubility of these salts. And because the solubility of the hydroxides is lesser the solubility of the chlorides, and therefore these are not precipitated as their chlorides. Imagine if group 1 gelatinous, you cannot gelatinous is the consistency. Okay, gelatinous के लिए आप कोई रीजन यहां से नहीं दे सकते हो. Okay, it's the appearance of the salt. Now imagine there is iron and aluminium which is present in the sample. आपको क्लोराइड्स क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है? When you are adding HCl, why are you not getting them? Because the solubility product is very high. Okay, so they continue to remain in the solution. These things do not undergo precipitation. The chlorides which undergo precipitation are only in group 1. Remember, the ions which get precipitated only upon addition of acid are the ones which are present in group 1, not in group 3. Group 3 are precipitated by using hydroxides. So if you are getting the brown precipitate, if you add potassium ferrocyanide to it, you will get a blue precipitate. ठीक है, आपको ब्राउन प्रेसिपिटेट जो मिल रहा है उसको पहले आप क्या करो कि ऐड कर उसमें HCl ऐड करो. Okay, so whatever brown, if you are getting this brown precipitate, you add HCl, and this, by adding HCl, it will convert it into FeCl3, and then you add K4FeCN6. When you add K4FeCN6, you will get a blue precipitate. This blue precipitate is of Prussian blue, Fe4FeCN6. Fe4FeCN6. All thrice. We get this as the precipitate. Intense blue precipitate मिलता है. Okay. Now, if there is gelatinous white precipitate, what you do is you take this precipitate, you add dilute HCl to it. Okay, so dissolve the precipitate in dilute HCl, and then you add NaOH. Okay, you will re-obtain a gelatinous white precipitate which will be soluble in excess of NaOH. And to the other part, what you do is you add ammonium hydroxide drop by drop. You will get a blue floating mass of colorless in the colorless solution. Okay, you'll get a blue floating mass in the colorless solution. So please do remember that we do not have to go to the entire depth of what these individual tests are. However, In fact, if you just focus on the color of the precipitate, that you'll get the right answer. So जब आप litmus solution and red, what you do when you add litmus solution to this solution of aluminium in HCl is if you add to it, you will get a red coloration because the solution is acidic. When you add NH4OH, NaOH drop by drop, it becomes alkaline, and until aluminium hydroxide is precipitated once again. And then you add, so this aluminium hydroxide क्या करता है ना कि ये blue solution को absorb कर लेता है, actually adsorb करता है, because the blue color which is obtained is of a dye. This dye get adsorbed on the surface of aluminium hydroxide, which functions as a very good adsorbent, and then this gelatinous precipitate turns into a blue colored mass. Okay, it turns into a blue colored mass, and that gives a test for presence of aluminium. Going forward, what are the tests for group 4? So how do we detect group 4? Group 4 को detect करने का तरीका बहुत simple है. Whatever filtrate that you obtain from group 3, you pass H2S to it, because the solution is already basic. You pass H2S to it. ठीक है. अगर आपको white precipitate मिलता है, then it is zinc. If you are getting flesh pink color का precipitate, salmon pink color precipitate, then it is Mn. And if there is black precipitate, then there is nickel or cobalt. Okay, तो फ्लैश कलर प्रेसिपिटेट मिल गया, आप पहले ही आपने बोल दिया कि Mn है. ओके, फ्लैश कलर प्रेसिपिटेट और पिंक कलर प्रेसिपिटेट if you obtain, or buff color precipitate you obtain, you immediately say that there is Mn. Okay, if you get white precipitate, you will immediately say that there is zinc. अगर if you get this white color precipitate, you add dilute HCl to it, dissolve it, and then you add NaOH to it, you will get a white colored precipitate of zinc hydroxide, which will be soluble in excess of NaOH. Okay, but when you get black precipitate, then there is nickel and cobalt. So black precipitate contains nickel and cobalt. How would you detect whether it is nickel or cobalt? So what you do is you dissolve this precipitate in HCl and you divide it into two parts. To the first part, you add ammonium hydroxide. Okay, you add NH4OH plus dimethyl glyoxime, DMG. Okay, if you add NH4OH and dimethyl glyoxime and you are obtaining a bright red precipitate, that means the black precipitate contains nickel. And if you are adding, so you react ammonia, you add NH4OH to it, and then you acidify it with acetic acid and solid potassium nitrite. So you add CH3COH and potassium nitrite, KNO2. If you are getting a yellow precipitate, that means there is cobalt. So remember, there are very specific tests, very specific pointers. ये specific pointers आपको याद रखने हैं. You do not have to remember the whole set of reactions. Remember that if there is dimethyl glyoxime which is being utilized and you get a red precipitate, that means it should immediately come to your mind कि हाँ भाई ये test किस लिए किया गया है? For detecting nickel. Okay. So let's move on to group 5. Group 5 के सारे precipitates हमारे क्या कलर के होते हैं? We have the colors of these precipitates. We obtain them as carbonates, and these precipitates are white in color. इनका एक पहले भी आप टेस्ट करके आइडेंटिफिकेशन कर लेते हो, that is flame test. When you do a flame test, if you get a green color, that means there is barium. If you get if there is crimson red, okay, so there is strontium. If there is brick red, then there is calcium. So you have already made a detection. Now you need to confirm them. So what you do is you take the precipitate and you dissolve it in acetic acid. Okay, so जितने भी आपको precipitate मिल रहे हैं, Ba2 plus, Sr2 plus, Ca2 plus, these precipitate, whatever you are obtaining after passing ammonium carbonate, you dissolve in acetic acid. Dissolve it in acetic acid. Once you have dissolved it in acetic acid, you separate it into 3 parts. एक पार्ट में आप क्या करो कि पोटेशियम क्रोमेट ऐड करो. Okay, if you get a yellow precipitate, that means there is barium. Okay, flame test तो आपने पहले ही कर लिया है. Next, if to the second part of it, अगर barium present है नहीं present है वो अलग बात. If you have the second part should be treated with ammonium sulfate. You heat it and you scratch the sides of the test tube and you cool it. You get a white precipitate. Okay, so आप क्या कर रहे हो? Second solution में you add ammonium sulfate and then you heat it. You will get some salt which will be sticking on the side of the test tube. You scratch it and you cool it. You will get a white precipitate. Okay, then you take the third part of the solution. The third part of the solution is treated with ammonium oxalate. You will get a white precipitate of calcium oxalate. So 3 चीजें आपको करनी है. आपको इसको डिवाइड कर देना है. This solution has to be divided into 3 parts. First part, you add K2CrO4. In the second part, you add ammonium sulfate. And to the third part, you add ammonium oxalate, NH4 whole twice C2O4. First, K2CrO4 is used for detecting barium because barium chromate will be obtained. Ammonium sulfate will be utilized to detect strontium because the strontium sulfate which is obtained is white in color, and ammonium oxalate is being utilized which will create calcium oxalate which is white in color. Okay, ये हो गया आपका टेस्ट फॉर ग्रुप 5. कलर्स याद रखो. If you remember colors, most part of your job is done. And the last one is for group 6. इनमें से अमोनियम का टेस्ट हमने पहले पढ़ लिया है. What is the test for ammonium? What you do is you take the salt and you put it on your palm and you rub it. If you get a smell of ammonia, that means there is ammonium salt which is present. ठीक है. एक दूसरा टेस्ट क्या होता है कि you add Nessler's reagent. You will get a brown precipitate of basic mercury amido iodide. Okay, this is also known as the iodide of Millen's base. This brown precipitate is known as the iodide of Millen's base. So दो टेस्ट हैं. What you do is if you take a salt and मान लो कि you are testing it for presence of group 6 cations and you are trying to test it for ammonium, then you take the salt, and you take a pinch of it, you rub it on your palm. Because of hydrolysis, you will obtain a smell of ammonia. Okay, if you then take the salt solution, add Nessler's reagent, that is potassium tetraiodmercurate 2, K2HgI4, then you will get a brown precipitate. You will get a brown precipitate of um, you will get a thick brown precipitate of iodide of मिलन space. Okay, ये हो गया अमोनियम के लिए. एंड द लास्ट वन इज फॉर मैग्नीशियम. मैग्नीशियम के लिए टेस्ट के लिए हम क्या करते हैं, वी सो इफ मैग्नीशियम इज प्रेजेंट we add sodium hydrogen phosphate solution. Okay, sodium hydrogen phosphate solution, you will get a white precipitate of MgNH4PO4. You get a white precipitate of MgNH4PH4. remember, ये करना किसके साथ है, you take the solution with the filtrate that you obtain after testing group 4 and then you do this test. Okay, the filtrate that you have obtained after testing group 5, you do the test with that filtrate. Clear? That filtrate will contain magnesium and ammonium. Understood? So please do remember all these tests. ये सारे tests simple है, easy to understand है. इनको separately पढ़ो, समझने की कोशिश करो. And do not try to rush to remember everything at one go. It will take some time. If it takes time, remember that you have to invest that amount of time in this chapter. कुछ एक chapters easy होते हैं, कुछ एक chapters difficult होते हैं. अब समझ लो कि इस chapter में information काफी ज़्यादा है. You need to assimilate that information properly. Okay? So with this, I end today's session, and this brings us to the end of I would say the qualitative analysis or the systematic qualitative analysis for cations as well as anions. I hope you have enjoyed this session. हमने अभी तक, this is like the 5th session for this, and please do remember that in 5 sessions में हमने जो जितनी चीजें पढ़ी हैं, even if you remember that will be more than enough. Okay, so that's all for today, guys. Please do remember to solve questions, and if you solve questions, please try to cross reference it with the information which is given in the book or in this lecture. Okay, so until next time, all the very best and have a lovely time, guys. Okay, ciao, bye bye, have a lovely day.